Good evening, everybody, and welcome into another episode of New England Sports Weekly. As always, I am your host, Sean Metcalf, and I'm glad that you have decided to listen in this evening or watch on YouTube. If you're watching, sorry about a little bit of a late start here, but I did want to catch the end of the Red Sox game, not for the actual Red Sox, but because Dennis Eckersley is calling it a career, as well as wanted to see Xander Bogaerts as well with his send off, just to see if who knows if this might be the last that we see of Xander in a Red Sox uniform. We'll get into that a little bit more as well. But of course, like I said, wanted to catch a little bit of the Dennis Eckersley goodbye as well, because he's somebody that I just absolutely love watching as a baseball and obviously Red Sox fan. Getting to see him every night is just amazing. On the broadcast, he brings it. He's himself. He's the truest form. He's not BSing you at all. He is one of the best analysts in all of Major League Baseball, and I would put him up there against any of the other sports as well. He is amazing, amazing, and it's going to be unfortunate now that he is calling it quits, but he is going to be going back home to California and be with his grandkids, and going to be it's going to be sad without Peck, but we wish him nothing but the best in luck in the rest of his life as well. But so that's why we were a little slow getting started here, but we are going to kick off another great show here tonight as we are into October, folks. We are officially into October. Last week was the last week. Actually, no, last weekend was the first week in October. Might see how time flies here, but we're officially full swing in October, getting ready for Halloween season here. And started to get my house decorated. I'd swing the camera around here, but unless the room's a little bit of a mess. But I have some of the Halloween decorations there in the room. Maybe one of these days, maybe once I get everything up and running, we'll Halloween wise, we'll show you what's going on in the good old room here, trying to turn it into a little bit of a haunted house, if you will, for getting seasonal. It's the one holiday I actually like because it's not just all rainbows, unicorns, and show ponies and all the. It's not like a Hallmark holiday. This is an actual cool holiday as far as to decorate for. Don't get me wrong. I like the other holidays. Don't come at me. I love Christmas. I love all those, but Halloween is more of the one I like to decorate. As far as we're decorating for, that's the one I like. But nonetheless, we're getting sidetracked here. But it's going to be a full show here as we'll jump into our out of the box segment. Still looking for that sponsor. Just hit me up. You know where to find me. And of course, we are going to get into a lot of Patriots, a lot of Red Sox, a lot of that here. And we'll start things off in the out of the box segment with the New England Patriots as they dropped the game to the Packers 27-24 in overtime. So they took the Green Bay Packers all the way to OT. But the bigger news of the day is the Patriots already down their starting quarterback in Mac Jones, who has a high ankle sprain, is still technically not on the injured reserve. We're down to Brian Hoyer and Bailey Zappe. And of course, Brian Hoyer, what was it, in the first quarter or early second, he gets taken back to the locker room for a concussion. And of course, in all weeks where everything was going on with Tua and his concussion, Brian Hoyer gets one. So, of course, the Patriots are going to be very cautious with this as they don't want to be in any hot water like the Dolphins do. But Brian Hoyer left the game, and in steps rookie third-string quarterback Bailey Zappe. And Bailey Zappe had a decent game. He had a pick or two in this game, but he actually played okay. Of course, then again, you got to take it with a grain of salt because they dumbed down the playbook. They really took care of them. They weren't calling any exotic plays, so it was dumbed down from that standpoint. But from what they were feeding him in the limited amount, he was doing solid for what you would expect, and did throw his first career NFL touchdown pass to Devontae Parker, albeit it was after the play clock had expired. But thank you for that gift, boys in stripes there to the Zebras, giving away Bailey Zappe his first career touchdown pass. And again, like I said, the Patriots played defensively pretty well against Green Bay in the first half. And then things kind of unraveled in the second half where Aaron Rodgers became Aaron Rodgers and finally found his footing with some of his rookie wide receiving weapons, mainly not Aaron Dobbs. Geez, Romeo Dobbs. That's a blast from the past with Aaron Dobbs. Man, it was a wasted draft pick. But anyways, Romeo Dobbs and the rest of his crew, they were able to find a little bit going on and ended up outlasting the Patriots and finally got their overtime field goal. So it was probably the most exciting game that we've probably seen in a long time, probably since the Patriots melted down not halfway through, but sometime in November last year, probably around if you want to pinpoint maybe that Colts game that they blew. But really it's been probably not in real time, but in football, like regular season football weeks, it's probably been 7-8 weeks since we've been very entertained by this Patriots team. But now even though they lost, it was very entertaining because they were able to go step for step with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers for most of this game. And they came away with a loss. And again, but the bigger story coming out of this was Brian Hoyer having to leave. And now we're down to Bailey Zappe. And of course, now that leaves the Patriots with trying to fill a void because, of course, nowadays with concussions and, of course, with the Tua injury, NFL teams are not going to play around with concussions, one for player safety, but, of course, for the public perception too, especially with what just happened to Tua, they're not gonna try to rush him back anytime soon. So that leaves the door open for the Patriots to bring in a backup quarterback, and they did do that today in bringing in in Gilbert and not Brian Gilbert, but he was on their practice squad last year. He's kind of bounced around a little bit, but of course they were trying to fill that void, and of course there were some other names out there. All the Cam Newton, that stupid speculation was thrown out there. Then, of course, there's something maybe about Taylor Heineke as well, because he actually, before he had his 15 minutes of fame with the Washington football team, Commanders now, he actually was on the Patriots practice squad with Tom Brady when Brady was here. So it's not like he hasn't been here before. So it would have been interesting to see if he had come back to New England, and not a controversy because it's really for the backup job. And despite what some talking heads out there want you to believe, I don't think it would be like this complete, utter competition out there. But as we mentioned, it's the Patriots did end up bringing in some depth here. Now again, let's not get too excited about what they did, but we'll see with Gilbert how that works. He'll probably be on the Patriots starting roster, at least for this game coming up against the Detroit Lions, depending on what happens with Hoyer. But of course, that also begs the question as far as what's going to happen with this Patriots team moving forward. How many are they going to even live up to the limited expectations that we had coming into this season? Not because of the lack of quarterback play, but because of the lack of what else was on this roster. So we'll definitely get into that as well. And of course, the Patriots bringing an old friend in Jamie Collins back onto the team as he's officially starting. But again, we're talking about an older Jamie Collins, so let's not expect any vintage Jamie Collins at this point. We're just talking about depth at linebacker here to help out Jawan Bentley. We'll see how that all unravels here for the Patriots. And of course, as we mentioned, the Boston Red Sox did end their season as they did pull out a victory 6-3, sweeping the Tampa Bay Rays. But again, their season was over long ago as they got eliminated, about 3 weeks ago. So their shot at the playoffs ended a long time ago. But of course, the bigger news was more off the field as far as this potentially might be Xander Bogaerts' last season in a Red Sox uniform because he's likely to opt out of his contract with the Patriots. With the Red Sox. And of course, Dennis Eckersley calling it a career retiring from the world of baseball. He played 20 some odd years in Major League Baseball plus his minor league career, and then 20 years in broadcasting. So he said it's been over 50 years combined in all his baseball experience. So the impeccable, the incredible, the just unmeasurable Dennis Eckersley, who just, as I talked about off the top of the show, is just amazing, called it a career. So we will talk a little bit about that as well. And in one last piece of news here is that the Boston Celtics did sign Blake Griffin to a 1-year deal as at depth at center. And that'll be interesting to see how that goes for the Boston Celtics. As he had an up and down year last year. Of course, the lasting image for Celtics fans was Jaylen Brown and the rest of the Boston Celtics absolutely just torching him in the first round against the Brooklyn Nets last year. So we know defensively he is not what he used to be in his heyday when he got drafted by the Clippers. But it will be an interesting depth piece to see how this all fits in to the Celtics as they get closer to the start of the season. All right, we will jump right into our number one topic right off the board, and that is going to be the New England Patriots and Bailey Zappe time, or Zappe hour, if you will, for the Patriots. Now, how happy is it going to be for the Patriots? I don't know if you can go throw a parade right now, and I'm not going to go all 2001 New England Patriots on you right now. I'm not going to go that crazy because remember, a certain person, a certain number 12 quarterback, Tom Brady, was in his second year out of Michigan. And at that time, obviously, very unknown out as far as in the NFL world. Everybody knew him from Michigan because he did make a number of starts there. I know everybody wants to make it seem like he made like 2 starts at Michigan, but remember, he split a pretty good chunk of time with him and Drew Henson. Were battling back and forth for the number 1 starting job. So it's not like he was some complete unknown. He started quite a few games. But anyways, getting sidetracked there. So I know some people want to go down that route where Bailey Zappe, 4th round pick, didn't get a lot of love. He's just there as the backup. Tom Brady was a 4th stringer in his first year in 2000, and then worked his way up to the backup in 2001. What are some of the parallels here? The starter, the incumbent starter, the 1st round draft pick goes down with an injury. Oh, the rookie played pretty well, although obviously you got to pump the brakes here with Zappe because it was what, 3/4 or a half of football through 99 yards. They didn't ask him to do a lot in this game. I'm not going to go down that route. I know the comparisons are there, but let's not get crazy, folks. Let's stop drinking some of that Kool-Aid here. Look, I drink that red, white, and blue I've drank that red, white, and blue Kool-Aid from time to time here. I mean, obviously you can all see it, but let's not go absolutely nuts here as far as the Patriots and Bailey Zappe. Listen, if he can continue to do what he did in this game against the Packers, where you're just asked to hand the ball off, be that game manager when the open receiver's there, when that play is there, that they draw up and there is that open option, then go ahead and take it, but don't force anything. We're not gonna ask you to be Mac Jones right now, where obviously Mac Jones has that playbook wide open to him. Because I know some people have pointed out, well, Mac Jones has got 5 interceptions, and then he's got 1 passing touchdown or a couple passing touchdowns on the year, so he hasn't been off to the hottest of starts. I'll fully admit that. Mac hasn't had the best start to the year, but we're not talking about a dumpster fire either. We're not talking about what's happening out with the Chicago Bears. I mean, I think what we talked about last week is Mac is a victim of what's going on with his coaching staff, because we saw last year him make very good decisions. He operates very well before the snap. And I know some people want to say, well, what's going on this year then? Did these 50-50 just jump balls that the Patriots are running? Well, again, that's what this, for some reason, Matt Patricia is turned this into the deep ball palooza at points here and sometimes. But I think this is where, if you jet where obviously with Bailey Zappi especially, you're going to have to turn it down. And I know with Brian Hoyer, you can open up the playbook to whatever you want as far as conceptually, as far as mentally for him, because he obviously has been in this league forever, been around the Patriots for a long time for his 3 stops here. So he knows what's happening. It's just his physical limitations. It's just obviously he's a backup for a reason, but it's more the physical talent. So that's why, obviously, that's why. Sorry, folks, a little bit of indigestion here, but that's why going into the game against the Packers, you thought that maybe they'd kind of be able to muck it up, and you might be able to toss it a little bit against them, but nothing great. Not like you would have been able to with Mac, but obviously now with Zappe, this is where I'm not going to go absolutely crazy, is because in that game they were just spoon feeding him some of the most bland plays, feeding him a lot of run plays where you're leaning on that line and those running backs a lot more. So even if you give Bailey Zappi this full week of practice, yes, you're going to allow him to do a little bit more. It's not going to be 90% run, 10% pass. Maybe it's 30% pass, 70% run. So you give him a little bit more. You make him feel a little bit more confident over the week. Well, if you get 150 yards, 170 yards passing, a touchdown, or even if it's just not a touchdown, but he drives you into the red zone, you're able to punch it in on the ground or through some trick plays in the end zone. Sure. I'm okay with that, but you just have to set your expectations lower. I think some people took that one half of football in Green Bay and were like, wow, they kept up with the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers. My God, this is amazing. Let's damn the torpedoes. Let's just put the ball in Bailey Zappi's hands and see what happens here. And I think people are seeing what happened in 2001 and just hoping for some of the same results. You gotta be realistic about this. You have to be realistic. We're talking about a rookie quarterback taken in the 4th round. He didn't play at any Power 5 school. He played at Western Kentucky. He played again, and now I know Marshall has produced some great NFL players, obviously notably the greatest receiver I ever saw in my life, because I was technically, yes, I was alive for when Jerry Rice was still around, but his heyday was really before I was born. Obviously, I know like he was still with the Niners in '95 through, what was it, 2001. But the point being is Randy Moss was in his prime receiver, best receiver I've ever seen in my life. That's the point I'm trying to make, folks. In his prime, and the second best receiver of all time. They produced at Marshall. Chad Pennington was there. So the point is that yes, I know that Marshall has produced some good football players, but still, we're not talking about Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, USC, Notre Dame, any of these legendary powerhouse schools that just pump out NFL talent on a yearly basis. And I know when he transferred over to Western Kentucky, I know he broke the FCS record, the college football record for most touchdown passes with 60. But again, I'm not going to go crazy on this because he's still a lot to put on his plate right now. So again, this is where we go back to the spoon feed analogy. You gave him a little bit last week. He got his first touchdown away. Now you give him the full week of practice. You don't completely open it up. You just keep on giving a little bit more to learn here, a little bit more that he's comfortable with. And again, this is where, like I said, we're not going to go a 50-50 split here. Maybe we go somewhere in the 25 to 30 or 20, somewhere between that 20, or I'll lower it even a little bit, 20 to 30% pass to run. I mean, 20 to 30% pass, and then that other 80 to 70% run. So you're building a more confidence. You're going against a Detroit team that has a bad defense, although Detroit can sling the ball. They are a very, very, not to say good offense, because I'm not a full believer in Jared Goff as far as a real life quarterback, fantasy wise. If you can go get Jared Goff, by the way, go get him, because he's producing out there. It may not be pretty, but because of how far they are down. But again, he has been a pretty solid quarterback for the Lions. But again, they have a very good offense from the standpoint of they have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was an absolute steal, what they got in the fifth round last year in the draft. And I was absolutely begging the Patriots to get him because, I mean, obviously after some of those other receivers went off the board that I really wanted, he was the late round guy that I loved coming out of USC. And of course, Bill Belichick said, nope, 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 nope. And now he's become an absolute stud with the Lions. And whenever they get Jameson Williams back, that could be a scary wide receiver core that they have if Jameson Williams lives up to his potential. But as far as with Detroit, they have a good offense. They have a sieve of a defense. So if you had Mac Jones, this would have the makings of a shootout. Now, this is where I think obviously the Patriots want to live in the muck and the grime from this standpoint and run the ball, slow this game down, obviously, because you have a rookie quarterback, and try to control the clock here. And now, obviously, as well as the Patriots played last week against Aaron Rodgers, and I know you can make the excuse with their defense last week that, okay, they played a Packers team without Devontae Adams, without a great receiving core, but still, it's not like they were chopped liver out there. I mean, Romeo Doubs looks like he has some promise. He should have had 2 touchdown catches last week. He should have had the game winner at the end of that game. Just didn't have control as it hit the ground at the very end. And those running backs and A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, those are 2 legit. A.J. Dillon could be a number 1 on anybody's team. And so they have some decent pieces. Yes, they don't have Devontae Adams, but still, it's Aaron freaking Rodgers. So you can't just take him lightly. And we saw what happened in the second half after he started to heat up. But they played pretty decent against Aaron Rodgers. I mean, they played great in the first half, but the second half is where you get which turns this into a decent game because they did not play great in the second half. So it's tale of kind of 2 halves. But again, if you can get what you had in that first half against Rodgers, or something that resembles that against a lesser quarterback in Jared Goff, who obviously we know from his time with the Rams with a better offensive coordinator got absolutely destroyed in Super Bowl 53 when he was with the Rams. Because remember that game where the Patriots were bringing zero blitzes. They just absolutely manhandled that high flying Rams offense. So this is a defense that we know Jared Goff has trouble with. So even though they have a good offense, this is where the Patriots, I think, we'll obviously get into this game a little bit more. I'm just getting to the standpoint that I think this is where the Patriots defense can kind of muck things up here and kind of keep it a little bit closer and help out a guy like Bailey Zappe. Between the running game and the defense kind of slowing things down, this is where I think Bailey Zappe is not going to be asked to go out there and try to get you out of a 21-0 hole, or you're down 17-3 and you have to climb out of it. Just because I think that Belichick is going to scheme this up, especially defensively, where to slow down this Lions offense, and you can try to use that running game and try to control the clock here and try to. And obviously, we know that the Patriots can throw to their running back, so it's not just an old school 3 yards in a cloud of dust. They can use them in multiple ways, but again, this is where I do think they're going to be able to at least muck this game up and slow it down enough where they're going to have a chance to kind of be in it, because we're not talking about a great Detroit team here, folks. We really aren't. So again, we'll talk about that in just a second. But one other thing here when it comes to Bailey Zappe that I will give him some credit for is just yes, he had times in the pocket where you could definitely tell he was a rookie. You definitely could. It wasn't as pretty as watching Mac last year for most of the season, where you could tell this guy knows what to do in the pocket. But for the most part, Bailey Zappe, outside of a couple sacks, there were times in the pocket where he was able to use a little bit of his athleticism, move around, and at least try to make a play. There were a couple times where he threw a couple incompletions where he might have had a chance. But again, for his baptism under fire, wasn't the worst I've ever seen. It was, trust me, we didn't see a Nathan Peterman situation when Nathan Peterman came in for the Bills. What was it? 2018? Threw 5 picks and a half or a quarter or something stupid like that. We didn't see him absolutely shit the bed. But I mean, he, like I said, he had an interception in there. But again, once he settled down, once Belichick and Matt Patricia kind of called those plays to calm him down, I think we actually saw him operate pretty decent under the pocket. So I just think he's got a little bit of poise. He's got a little bit of factor where you saw him kind of pushing around Judge in a playful way after they got the touchdown. And he seems to at least be liked by his teammates. So he's not one of those. I don't think it's going to be a total deer in the headlights look, is my whole point here, is that you're not handing this over to some rookie that is absolutely lost out to sea at this point. So that I know that kind of simplifies it, but really that's all you can really ask for somebody in his shoes that had to come in as a third stringer when he was, I mean, obviously he was the second stringer for this game because you're not with Mac, but you really weren't expecting to do much this year at all. And then, of course, you get thrust into this position. And most quarterbacks, you'd probably see him come in and wilt where he was. But to his credit, at least for one game, he held his ground, and he kept the Patriots in that game by me saying that. Now that I sound like Porky Pig, geez. I don't mean obviously he was slinging the ball around the yard, but he was not making bad decisions. So if we can see more of him just being a game manager, making those right decisions, just make sure you keep on getting those first downs, controlling the clock at least at this point in time. And then I feel okay about Bailey Zappi. So, like I said, I know some people want to call it Zappy Hour or your Zappy or throw out those puns, but I'm cautiously optimistic. I wouldn't bet on it, but at least you have somebody that I think as a rookie isn't lost out to sea at this point. And we'll see how that all kind of goes. Now, one side of the ball that I do want to touch on, we kind of talked about there as far as how it can help Bailey Zappi, and that's the defense. Now, again, there was like a tale of two halves because they played pretty decent when it came to the Green Bay Packers game last weekend. The first half was actually very, very good. They shut Aaron Rodgers down. They weren't allowing him to pass. I think he was under 100 yards passing in the first half. And then, of course, right towards the end, we saw Jack Jones get a pick six off of Rodgers, and that was Rodgers' second ever pick six at Lambeau Field. And I think it's like his fourth or fifth of all time. So he doesn't throw a lot of pick sixes. He doesn't give a lot of house calls to the opposing defense. So this is very rare. And Jack Jones took advantage of it, got the Patriots up. What was it? 10-7. Sorry. 10-3 at the half. But they played very well against Rodgers. Very, very well. It's a surprise, and that kind of surprised me because, like I said, I know they don't have Devontae Adams. He's out in Vegas, but we're still talking about back-to-back MVPs, a guy that's got two stud running backs. He's got some young, developing, emerging weapons in Romeo Doubs. And, of course, you have Christian Watson, who has some drop issues, but the talent's there. He just has to be more consistent. Alan Lazard is a solid number 2, number 3 receiver, but just like some of those Patriots receivers out there, you don't want to be in your one. But at least with the Packers, they have Romeo Doubs, who I think is probably going to ascend into being the number 1. And if you remember, I picked him as my offensive rookie of the year. It's kind of a little bit slow, except for now the last 2 weeks he's picked it up, and he really looks like the Packers have put him in that number 1 spot going forward, at least if he continues to earn it. So we're not talking about a Packers team that is completely bereft of weapons, but it's not the It's not the Packers of old where they were just absolutely loaded with weapons. We're not talking about Devontae Adams, Randall Cobb, and Jordy Nelson, because I think what was that, the 2014, 2015 team that had that on it, just a plethora of weapons. But again, it's still you're still playing Aaron Rodgers. So what they did last week against Rodgers, I was pleasantly surprised with. So that's something that you can kind of take moving forward. Now again, they did shoot themselves in the foot in the second half. They had some bad penalties. They played off. They took some chances where they ended up getting burned against the Packers. So again, it wasn't perfect, but there were some good things to build off of moving forward. So, especially out of the secondary, what scares me though is without Lawrence Guy to help Christian Barmore and Devon Godchaux, the run defense is taking a little bit of a hit because remember, you don't have the same linebacking core. No, well, not really that they've had a great linebacking core the last 3 years or so, but now obviously with its Jawan Bentley and Tavia, they're really the two kind of run stuffer linebackers because the rest of them are kind of those smaller, speedier guys that kind of flex in and outside. And then you use some of your strong safeties, free safeties, either Adrian Phillips the Kyle Duggars out there, the McCourtys, they'll come down and help in the run. But still, that's where last week not having Lawrence Guy out there really kind of hurt that run defense, and that's where you saw Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon just gash him at times. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of all goes moving forward. Now, next week against Detroit, depending on what happens with DeAndre Swift, he's another very good young emerging running back. They use him a lot more in the passing game, so he's going to be a multi-dimensional threat. So that's where maybe you see a guy like Adrian Phillips, Kyle Duggar kind of trail him. We'll see how that goes. So that's maybe a speedier linebacker. And then, of course, Jamal Williams, the former Packer, who's been with Detroit, the last 3 years? Last week, he had a really good game against the Seahawks. But so they have two good running backs that can take advantage of you. So that'll be something to see how Detroit attacks that defensive line. That's where I am kind of worried moving forward here, is that their run defense, which has been a problem in the past, which now that you don't have Guy, that could be an issue again. So we'll see if maybe Barmore, they put Barmore in that role a little bit more. Although he's kind of been a little, not underwhelming, but he hasn't popped the same way we all thought he was going to be this year. I know it's still early. It's only been week 4, so we'll see moving forward. But there have been some signs with the defense where they've made some steps forward where I thought they weren't going to be, especially with the secondary. I thought that was going to be one of their major weaknesses, especially, well, I should say, when I say secondary, I especially mean the corner spot, because I do like the safeties with Duggar and with Phillips, but it's the corners that I'm worried about, because you're relying on smaller guys. You don't have Stephon Gilmore, a Darrelle Revis, a Ty Law, the bigger, more physical corners out there. But so far, it's been a pretty good result for most part, except for the second half and against the Packers, and one breakdown right before the halftime against Miami. So it's been some good positive momentum forward here for the Patriots secondary. Now, kind of looking at this Detroit game, as I know we've already kind of talked about some of the aspects of it, but again, this is where with Detroit, they're kind of in the same boat you are, as far as you're down more towards the bottom of the pack at the moment. And with Detroit, I mean, it's kind of the same old story here with Detroit. I know they have Dan Campbell, who is the star of Hard Knocks, made all the quotes about biting people's kneecaps off, had the awkward 1-minute silence at the last episode of Hard Knocks. But again, it's still the same old Lions, as far as they're still getting beat. They still have a Swiss cheese of a defense, and they have some pieces on offense, because going back to 2007, at when they drafted Calvin Johnson, who just made it to the Hall of Fame, for a year or 2 years, they had Kenny Golladay before he went to New York and is now on the missing persons list, because he just is absolutely trash right now. But now it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. So they've had good offensive pieces in Detroit. It's just been, okay, we can score points, but we give up a ton of points and then and turn the ball over. So again, it's more the same old story there with Detroit, with having some solid offensive pieces. You have a quarterback who is well, obviously Matthew Stafford was the outlier, because he was a really good quarterback. We saw him go and win a Super Bowl last year with the Rams, but it's been kind of more the same story. You have a good quarterback, you have a above average quarterback, or just at average quarterback, depending on wherever you want to put Jared Goff. I'm going to put him at average to maybe slightly below average, but he's a guy that you can make plays with. We've seen him at least be able to keep up in some of these shootouts between his time with the Rams and time here in Detroit. He's not an absolute waste. I wouldn't call him a bust of a first round pick, because he's had some success, but he's not. He'd be more of a guy that if I took him in the second round, second, third round, I get this production, I'd be a lot happier with what I got out of Goff. But still, he's mediocre, I guess is the best way to put it. So you have good offensive pieces with a mediocre quarterback. And what does that always say? We're going to be 500 to below 500. And that's right where the Lions are shooting. That's right where they're shooting for, is that below 500 record. So this is a team that you can capitalize off of mistakes. They're going to give them to you. You're going to be able to, you're not going to be able to absolutely run away from them because they have the pieces to stay with you. But like I talked about before, what Belichick's going to have to do is really slow this game down, not get into a track meet like most of the Detroit games have been this year. Because they're right to this point, they're averaging 32 to 35 points a game, which is absolutely ridiculous. So they can score them. So this is where Belichick's really going to have to control the clock with his running game and really put Jared Goff into a bad spot, where we talked about earlier with Belichick has been able to do that in his matchups against Goff since he came in the league in 2016. So he's been able to do it. It's just a matter of how long they can keep the Lions down for when they have these good pieces. So it'll be an interesting game. It's not going to be a pushover. When you normally see the Lions on the schedule, you're like, oh yeah, this is an easy win. I think the Patriots get a win out of this. I'll take the Patriots to win. I'll say 21-17. So the Patriots gets a couple touchdowns on the ground and one through the air. But I think this is where it's going to be tougher. Their lines are just going to hang around in this game. I think this is where Belichick does slow down Goff. He frustrates him just enough going up against Dan Campbell and the Lions. So I think they do pull out the victory here and improve to 2-3 on the season, but it's not going to be that normal Lions pushover. Now, one other thing here as we kind of wrap up our Patriots talk is kind of moving forward when it comes to Zappe and the expectations for this team. Now, we don't know how long Mac Jones is going to be out. There was a report out there today that Mac Jones is pretty much going to be ruled out when it comes to officially for this coming weekend's game against the Lions. No surprise there. But how long is Mac going to be out? Is it going to be 3 more weeks? Is it going to be towards the bye? Where is this going to land for Mac Jones? Because I mean, if this is only 2-3 more weeks of Mac missing time, you feel a little bit better, because if you can at least keep bailing water out of this ship during this quote unquote easier stretch where you get the Lions, the Bears, the Jets twice, you have a decent schedule. If you can at least bail the water out to keep yourself around 500 at this point, or just maybe a game below 500, and you have Mac coming back if it's in 2 or 3 weeks, because remember, he hasn't been put on the IR yet. So maybe that means he's closer to coming back. We don't know. But if it is shorter than we expected, then I mean, if you can get by, kind of scheme it up with the running game and the defense, then I feel you still might have a shot at getting, maybe still competing for a wild card spot. Maybe not getting it, but at least maybe competing for one. But if Mac is out until week 12, week 13, whatever it is at this point, I mean, you're going to be asking a lot for a rookie quarterback. And even if Brian Hoyer comes back, where you can give him more of the playbook, it's still going to be a tall task, because we're talking about a career backup in Brian Hoyer. So I'm not going to be jumping for joy. Don't get me wrong, but it'd be just a minimal improvement. So I'm not one of these people out there that's calling for the Bailey Zappe, Mac Jones controversy quarterback competition out there. Don't get me wrong, and don't get me started on that, because that I've heard some people with some of the opinions on that. It's just absolutely ridiculous. We're talking about a guy. We're talking about a we're talking about a fourth round rookie quarterback that just passed for 99 yards and just was absolutely spoon fed information. So let's not get too crazy out there. So if it's long term, if it's anything past what, 4 or 5 more games, if it's past that mark, let's put it at 5. If it's past 5 more games where you don't have Mac, then we're screwed. I mean, we're already screwed, but we're we're still we're still probably on. Let's put this at like a 10 level apartment building that's on fire. We're right now. It's not like we're on the 10th floor and we're absolutely hung out to dry. We're screwed. We're probably on the 7th floor at this point. Screwed. We're we're in trouble, but at least we might be close enough to the escape hatch there, where we might be able to get out if Matt comes back in 5 weeks and maybe salvage some of this season. But if it's more than 5 weeks, then we're at the top of that building and we're really screwed. We're super screwed. So, I mean, listen, I'm not excited where we are. I'm not trying to be this positive and be like, oh well, we're not super screwed, but you're in the softer spot of the schedule, so that's why if it's a shorter time frame, you have a shot of. I don't think the likelihood of you going like, oh, 6-0, 5-1 is great, but I think you have an opportunity where if you can go 3-3, because what that would put you at you're 4-6. Okay, so you're at 4-6. You get Mac back, and then you try to get back to 500 and see where it goes from there. So, but obviously, if you don't have Mac, then we might be looking at a 6-win season, 5-win season. It might be kind of hard if it's more than that, because it would be difficult, really difficult. So we'll see how that all goes. But I it's not like I'm all jumping for joy and I'm all happy that we have Zappe starting over Brian Hoyer as far as for your long-term future of this season. But I mean, like I said, if it's a 5 game span, I think you can make do. You can make do. But if it's anything past that, man, we're getting into playing for a top 10 pick in the draft territory, top 10, top 5 pick in the draft territory, if that's what we're talking about. So it's not looking great. But look, the chances of you even being able to even sniff a playoff spot are slim at this point without having Mac. So don't get too excited here, folks. Don't fall for any false gold that's out there with Zappe. Just temper your expectations. You got to. You really have to. So we'll definitely keep a lookout here, see how things go with Mac, and keep you up to date on that, because that's going to be the big story, and if how long we're going to be without Mac, and keep you up to date with the progress of Bailey Zappe, and see if maybe he could be a miracle worker, or if we're just stuck with another rookie quarterback that's a game manager, and we'll see. Hopefully we don't have a Nathan Biederman on our hands. I don't think we do. Like I said in the earlier segment, I think mentally he's there, mentally he's with it, and mentally I saw outside of a few plays, I mean, I was okay with what he did. So I think you're in okay hands. But I'm not asking him to go out there driving 200 miles an hour in the Ferrari and expect to not bring it home and not have it all up and bent up and out of shape like you would with Mac. But we'll see how it all unravels. Now, one thing that did unravel this year was the Boston Red Sox. They are done. They are over. The 2022 season is all she wrote, folks, as the Red Sox did end the season on a little bit of a high note as they took a 3-game sweep against the Tampa Bay Rays, who already wrapped up their season. So, I mean, nothing that they were really playing for, because after how things ended last night, they knew their fate of the playoffs. But the Red Sox ended the season under 500 at 78-84, last place in the American League East. How about that? The Baltimore Orioles won more games than you. They were 83-79. And folks, it's not like the rest of this division's getting any worse. All these teams are pretty much here to stay, because even the Orioles, I know people might want to be like, oh, that was a little bit of fluke, but some of their talent, you got the Adley Rutschmans, the Ryan Mountcastles. You have some of their solid young pitching. They have some pieces that are there. Now, obviously, if they go out and spend a little bit of money there, then that could be scary for you. I mean, I'm not going to pick the Orioles to make the playoffs or anything, but they're not a easy out anymore. They aren't. They really aren't. So, and obviously we know the Yankees, Blue Jays, and Rays, what they've done. We all know that. They're all always in the discussion of the playoffs, at least over the last 3-4 years. So the Red Sox have a lot of work to do in front of them. Of course, well, in some later podcasts, we'll get into some really in-depth talk about what they're going to have to do and the option and a lot of the options they have. But of course, the biggest thing, the two big ones this offseason, besides getting some pitching, the two priorities that they have to have is to re-sign Xander Bogaerts, bring him back. He's your leader. He's your shortstop. Yeah, is he the greatest defensive shortstop in the league? No, but he's improved. And I know some people want to cite some metrics out there, but I mean, the last couple of years he's been solid. And of course, that bat, he did. I know he didn't hit 20 home runs this year, but I mean, again, this is still a guy that has played pretty well and came on strong at the end of the season. But again, one thing, he's still one of the top hitting shortstops in baseball. But that leadership is also that is so hard to really find people like that can play like him in Boston. And he's proven it time and time again. So he is the complete package. So this is where they have to make sure that they bring him back. You have to make sure that you don't lowball him, give him fair market or a little bit above. So this is where I think they need to reach out to him on like a 5 to 6 year deal worth 25 to 27 million a year, or maybe you front load it a little bit more and towards the back it's a little bit different. But this is a guy where you need to bring him back. He loves it here. I know obviously he's not going to just stay here just because he loves it here. That's not my number one reason for him staying. But I don't think this is a guy that is completely, I have to have every single last penny. He wants fair market. He wants good money. You don't hire Scott Boras to say, no, I'm just going to leave I'm not going to leave $100 million on the table just to save one spot. But this is where I think he's a guy that uses Scott Boras more to the advantage of at least getting fair market value, where other people use Scott Boras to get every single last penny. So I think he's using Scott to drive up the price, but I don't think it's like some other guys that have Scott Boras where I'm going to be the number one at my position, at least until the next contract comes out. But to me, at least, the whole point is here that I don't think Bogaerts is the guy that absolutely has to have every single last penny. Happiness does factor into it, but obviously he's not going to stay here if you offer him what the reports were, where they just pretty much gave him a 4-year extension, just tacking on one more year to this existing contract. So this is where I think you have to go out, offer him a 5 to 6 year deal, legitimate 5 to 6 year deal worth $25 to $27 million. And I think if you offer him that, I think he would take it, because again, I don't think he's a $30 million player at this point, but he is in that 25 plus range, especially because of the position he plays and where he hits in the order. So this is a guy that you have to bring back. And the other one is you have to make sure that you get Rafael Devers extended to a long-term deal, and don't pull a John Lester on him. Don't lowball him. Go out there, put your best foot, at least put a good foot forward. Maybe I would love to say put your best foot forward, but obviously you understand what I'm saying is that don't go out there, offer him a 10-year, $200 million contract. Where obviously I know back in the day that would have, like, back when I was in elementary, middle school, when that would have been like, ooh, that's a ton of money, because that was like a Manny Ramirez A-Rod type of deal back in those days. But nowadays, if you're a top tier, top 10 caliber player like Rafael Devers, you're looking at 10 and 300 minimum. So this is, I think, where the Red Sox have to come in, offer him 10 for 3, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 for 330, 10 for 350, in that neighborhood. You're going to have to make a deal that hurts your pocketbook if you're the Red Sox. But guess what? To get the players of Rafael Devers caliber, Juan Soto, Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani, those type of guys, guess what? It's going to have to hurt. But but with Rafael Devers, he's proven he can play here. He's an absolute stud, and you have to make sure that you bring him back to this team. So just don't lowball him. Don't screw around. Give him a legitimate offer, or at least and obviously just keep the lines of communication open with him and keep it positive. And like I said, just don't start off with a lowball offer. Offer him a legitimate competitive offer, and just so you don't piss him off with that, because this is a guy that you have to have. So that's one of the big things there. And of course, it's going to be revamping this pitching staff, because you're losing guys from the starting rotation. You could lose Nathan Eovaldi, and obviously you're going to have guys like Pivetta returning. What do you do with Garrett Whitlock? What do you do with Tanner Houck? What do you do with some of those guys? They're going to stay in the bullpen. Are they going to come back to the rotation? Do you re-sign Waka? So there's a lot of those type of things swirling around. This is where, I mean, like I said, we'll get into who they should sign and that later on, but this is where you have to go out and get, I know obviously DeGrom is one of the big names thrown around out there, but maybe not DeGrom, because I don't know if the Mets will let him leave, but this is where you have to spend a good chunk of money on bringing in 2 or 3 guys as rotation. And when I say 2 to 3, maybe get a really good top of the rotation type of guy that you can bring in, a Rendon. If you can swing a DeGrom, do it, but I don't think you're going to be able to. But again, this is where you have to bring in, I don't want just bodies. Don't throw shit at the wall and hope it sticks type of situation. Actually go out there and sign some good starting pitching, because and remember, you have Brian Bayo, who when his first couple starts, first 3 or 4 starts were a little inconsistent. Some of them were rocky. They were a little up and down, but his last 6 starts of the season that he had towards the end of the year, he looked locked in. He looked really good. He looked legitimate. He started to show the signs of, this is why I was one of the top pitching prospects in your organization, and this is why I rose up the boards as one of the top tier pitching prospects in baseball. So you might be on to something very, very good in Brian Bayo. So you'll have him, you'll have Nick Pivetta back, you'll have, depending on what happens with Chris Sale. So if you get 2 or 3 other guys to come back, and even if you bring back a Nathan Eovaldi on a small deal, I would be, and go out and then get 1 to 2, then go out and get a couple other guys that you can bring in this rotation. So you got to revamp the pitching staff. You got to figure out where guys are going in the starting rotation and in the bullpen. Go out, get a legitimate closer if you can. I think you have to have a legitimate closer, lengthen out that bullpen, have the one guy that can be a stopper at the end. And then if you have Houck or Whitlock or have both of them out there, then that's a really good back end of the rotation. So you got to figure out the back end of your bullpen with what you want to do there. Go out, get a legitimate starting corner outfielder or just a legitimate starting outfielder that has some power that you can put out there. Just what happened this year with the outfield just is not going to cut it moving forward. You're going to have Kike and Verdugo back. So at least one starting caliber outfielder that has some power that you can bring in. And then we're cooking. But again, it's a tall task. There's a lot that can be done. There's a lot of things that have to be checked off this list that we're definitely obviously going to talk a lot about during the off season. But again, that's something that there's a lot of work to be done. And it sounds like behind the scenes, Red Sox management, i.e. ownership, or I should say ownership, i.e. John Henry, have talked about even to broadcasters, because it sounded like that's what Dave O'Brien and Eckersley were talking about in the broadcast today, was some of that as well. So, and then I've heard some other reports, that John Henry isn't pleased and he wants to, it sounds like he's going to be, I don't know if aggressive is the right word, but he's definitely going to make sure that they make some moves that I guess you could throw aggressive out there, that they're going to be in that aggressive mode heading into this offseason. They don't want to be where they were this year. So hopefully they do make some really good, smart baseball moves and keep this team back in the competition, because not having the Red Sox in the playoffs absolutely sucks. And trust me, I know you can't win every year. I understand. But it still sucks not to have the Red Sox in the playoffs. I love playoff baseball. I absolutely love it. And to not have the Red Sox in it, it sucks. It absolutely sucks. I'm always on the edge of my seat watching playoff baseball. I am riveted to it. So it just sucks when the Red Sox aren't in it. It just feels there's a hollow spot without them in the playoffs. So hopefully this ownership and John Henry are true to their word, and which in the past they have been when they've wanted to be competitive again, when they wanted to be back where they are. See, a la 2018, put together a great team, went to the World Series and won it. Arguably the best team in Red Sox history, right up there with 2004. So they hopefully the Red Sox ownership does put some money into it, because that would be, it just sucks not having the Red Sox in the playoffs. I hate having seasons like this where pretty much since August, the middle of August, it's been meaningless baseball. Meaningless. As far as for playoff position, I mean, I know they brought up guys like Tristan Casas, who we'll talk about, who I think is a good young piece to lean on, but that's another discussion for another day. But to not have them there just absolutely sucks. So, and one other thing that's gonna suck, and that's kind of that's bittersweet, was to see Dennis Eckersley calling it a career, as he is hanging it up after 50 years in professional baseball, and splitting that between his minor league and professional career in the major leagues. And then obviously his last 20 years at Nesson doing broadcasting. I know he's done some national games as well on TBS. He's 68 years old, and he has decided that he wants to call it a career, and is moving back out to his home state of California, back out to his home area near the Bay, San Francisco, Oakland area where he grew up. But the last couple of days have been so emotional for him. And I know you'll have to look up the comments, but watch the video. It's very moving. But he talked about Boston being basically, he said that Oakland, yes, is where he grew up and it's his home, but Boston is his home. He loves it here. Boston and New England is his home. Even though he grew up out in California, this is his home to him. And he didn't say like, oh, this is my second home. He said, this is my home. And this is a spot that he has a lot of passion for. And I know some people, when they think of Dennis Eckersley, they think of him closing all those games for the Oakland A's for 9 years. But he spent 8 years, and I know his final season in Boston when he came in 98 wasn't as that was at the very last year of his career, and that was at the very end of it. But after he got drafted in 70, or he came up in 76, 77 for the Indians, and then in 78 got traded over to Boston. So he spent in the prime of his career, there were 7 years in Boston, and in 78 he won 20 plus games. He was a star starting pitcher for most of his career in Boston. And then he went to Chicago where he had some good years with the Cubs. And then things started to kind of fall apart as a starter. And then that's when he got transferred over to being a reliever when he went to the A's. But the whole point of this is I know everybody thinks about him as an A, but he spent a lot of time here in Boston. People kind of forget that he spent just as much time as he did in Boston as he did in Oakland. And he absolutely loves this city. Like I'm not doing it justice what how he described it, but just go watch the emotional videos of him between yesterday and today. And it definitely kind of pulls at your heartstrings a little bit as well, just because you can just tell that he was so authentic and just absolutely loved it here. And this is another piece of him that he's leaving behind as far as leaving Boston, that you could just tell how genuinely he has affection for the Red Sox, for the people he worked with, for the fan base, for this region. It was just watching him all these years, because I remember when he first started out that he did kind of like the pre and post game for Nesson. And then I think in 2009 he started doing some fill-in games as far as when Jerry couldn't make it, or some other games where maybe Jerry had some time off, where he did a few things in 2009. And then slowly over the years, Eckersley would do more and more games as far as actual color analysis on the live broadcast. And then in 2016, it really kind of picked up. And then in 2019, that's when they did the 3-man booth with them and Jerry all together. And Eckersley was the best. And I know I'm biased because I watched all these Red Sox games, but Eckersley was the best color analyst in all of baseball, bar none. And that's because he wasn't pretentious. He wasn't fake. He didn't just put a face on for the cameras, just come up with all these sayings. He didn't just write them down on a piece of paper and say, oh man, there's some hairy cheese. There's some shoe. Oh, he's there's a pair of shoes, or some moss or lettuce, or any of those eckisms that you can go out there and you can listen to, or it's time to party after Mookie Betts hits the grand slam, or just any of these, calling it bridge ball, calling any of those sayings, any of those eckisms that he threw out there, those were all authentic. It's not like he wrote them down a la John Sterling. This is a guy that anything he said, you could tell it all came from the heart. And there were times that it made you laugh and it made you really think. And he was so entertaining. but it was authentically him. And that's why I loved Eck. He didn't, even though he was paid by the team, he didn't BS you about if a guy sucked or if a guy was great. If he truly believed it, he would say it. He would say it. And eh, you got the most authentic Eck every night, every single night. And it was amazing. It was awesome. And that's why I loved Eck. That's why he was the absolute best. Just because you didn't get the BS. You didn't get all this garbage out there. You didn't get some up there just stuttering and mumbling. You got a guy that loves baseball. He's a baseball lifer. He's talked about it on air where he would go home after long games, maybe on the road or at home. He'd go watch the West Coast games. He's one of us. Fan. He goes home and watches the Dodgers, the A's, the Angels, the other West Coast games, or if there's still another East Coast or Central game that's on. He'll watch that. This is a guy that eats, sleeps, and drinks baseball. He's one of us. And you could tell that from day one. And he gave you everything every night. And it was just a pleasure to watch Eck on TV every night. And I know I'm kind of getting a little mushy here about a broadcaster, but I mean, obviously he's a Hall of Fame closer, Hall of Fame starting pitcher, Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Famer. He he's one of the better. He's one of the best of all time as far as a player. But I mean, just as a broadcaster, it was so entertaining every night to tune in. And even like in a season like this in August and September, it at least kind of gave you a reason to tune in because if there was a guy like Brian Bayo this year or Tristan Casas, he would be excited for those guys. He would obviously understand that the game sucked. He wasn't going to sit there and say, "Oh, this game is great." And then the funny thing would be if the game sucked, if the Sox were getting blown out or just a bad game, you could just tell that Eckersley, not because he was disinterested, but he would tell it as it is. So from the good and all the great moments and the times that we shared, I'm happy for you, Eck. I wish you nothing but the best moving back out to your home. And I know he said he'll be back as far as visiting out here because, like he said, this is his home here as well. He loves it. This is going to be his. He'll be back, but obviously he's retiring from broadcasting baseball and being in baseball. He'll obviously come back and watch some games and be in probably the Legends booth, and he'll probably, when he comes back, he'll shoot into the Nethson booth and say hi to everybody. But it was just, I know I'm kind of going on here about Eck, but it is because of like what I went to school for and just knowing that that job is harder than people think it is. No, I'm not, trust me. I'm not telling you that broadcasting is the same as being being a scientist or being a police officer, being in the military, being a nurse, a doctor. I'm not saying that. I'm just, that's not what I'm getting at, people. So don't start jumping down my throat and send me those type of comments because it's different. But my point here is that I think people just don't realize that there's a lot of work, there's a lot of preparation, there's a lot of kind of behind the scenes that goes into creating a chemistry with a partner, and trying it's hard. Worked with some good ones. I've worked with a lot of bad ones, but when you get a guy like Eck, it's special, and it's gonna be hard not to think about maybe some of those games here because I don't know what Nesson's going to do full time. I don't think they've announced it yet. I'm hoping Kevin Euclid gets a lot more games because he grew like, I mean, I loved him as a player and just like listening to him do interviews, he's been entertaining as well. But it's a whole nother animal doing 3 to 4 hours of baseball every night. But Uke definitely grew on me this year. I think he kind of has that authenticity to him as well in his own way. Not the same as Zach, but he's still, you can tell he's authentic as well. So I think maybe Uke would be a good full-time replacement because he did like 50 games this year, and I think he was pretty good in his first year. But again, it'll be odd not seeing Eck out there. So we salute you, Eck. Enjoy your retirement. Enjoy hanging out with the grandkids, and we'll see you around town when you come in to visit the Sox. So best wishes to our friend Dennis Eckersley. Now, as we kind of wrap up the show, we'll do a few quick hitters here. As far as, of course, every week we do our big bet of the week. Now, this admittedly is not the best slate of games this week. There are some kind of duds out there. There's some mismatches. But one of the games that was interesting on the board is that Cincinnati Bengals at the Baltimore Ravens. And that game is in the later window here. That is, just taking a look here. That's our Sunday. That's actually the Sunday night game is the Bengals and Ravens. The Ravens are a 3-point favorite at home, so really it's kind of a little bit more of a pick 'em as the Bills have started to turn things around. But in this one, I will take the Ravens, who are just a slight favorite on the money line, minus 170, and I'll take the over. And to kind of sweeten the pot here, and it's not officially out yet, but I will take for a touchdown scorer in this game. Give me a Lamar Jackson rushing touchdown in this game. So if I were to throw that out here, just a second. Yeah, of course it's not officially out. I was kind of hoping by the time we got to this, it would be. But yeah, so I would probably guess it's going to probably put it up to what, 425 probably on your odds. So if you throw down what, $20, you're looking at what, 80 to $85, what, 80 to $90 that you'd be getting back. So it's not the biggest win that you're going to get this year if you take it, but to me, that's a game that out of this slate of games this weekend, where it's kind of a little bit of a kind of hodgepodge games here, I'm going to take Sunday night football game with the Bengals and the Ravens, and take the Ravens plus the over, which is 48. And like I said, if you take that, go home, get about $80 or so, and it's a solid weekend. You get some beers and get some food, and you'll be happy with that and with your winnings for this weekend. Now, as we kind of move over to the fantasy realm, it's our stardom and situms for this week. Now, as far as our stardom this week for running back, I mean, this one has kind of been made a little bit easier. And for me, that's going to be Miles Sanders of the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, going into the season, he was a guy that, if he was available later in the draft, after I kind of had already filled my starters and maybe I already had a backup that I liked and he was there, I would take him. And that's actually what happened in a few of my other leagues. And Miles Sanders has been a revelation this year. And he's absolutely in my start. And I know he's going up against a Cardinals team that has been pretty good against the run, but this Philadelphia team has been elite at running the football, between obviously their starting quarterback in Jalen Hurts is an elite runner at quarterback. Probably after Kyler Murray, I might take him next, and then Josh Allen, somewhere in that order. But Then after that, Miles Sanders has been just amazing. He has 72 attempts, 356 yards on the ground already, where last year, well, he had 137 attempts for 754 yards. And last year had no rushing touchdowns in 4 games, already has 3 rushing TDs. And the receptions, he has 8 receptions already, so he's on pace to already have more than he did last year, but more than his 26. But it's only amounted to 35 yards. So he does get some looks passing in the passing game, but we're not talking about an absolute stud when it comes to the passing game. But again, it's definitely more than passable. Definitely more than passable. So again, this is where he had that monster game last week, had 134 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 receptions for 22 yards. And he's been super solid all year long. Started off the year with 96 yards and a touchdown, 2 receptions, 9 yards. Next week had 80 yards for 3 receptions and 6 for three receptions, 6 yards. So, I mean, obviously last week was the huge blow up week for him, but again, he's proven to be very, very good here. And in most formats, he's in the top 10 as far as fantasy running back so far. So he's off to a good, solid start here. And again, for me, is a must start because the Cardinals are going to be in the mode where they're going to look run first, probably for Jalen Hurts, and where they're going to be teeing more off on him. Not that obviously they're not aware of how good Miles Sanders has been, but again, you're worried more about Jalen Hurts just taking off and absolutely gashing you from that way, where I think that's going to open up running lanes on maybe a few of those RPOs for Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders. So this could be a under the radar pretty good matchup, I think, because I know people want to say Arizona's had a good rushing defense, which they have, but I just think this is a whole nother animal when you have to face the Philadelphia Eagles in this particular game as well. So I am going to be very, very interested in this game. Now, moving over to the wide receiver slot here, one of the options that I'm actually excited for is going to be Chris Olave, who is going to be on my must start list for next week as they take on the Seattle Seahawks, who absolutely got gashed last week. They were run and thrown all over. So this is where, depending on, I know they've only allowed 3 passing touchdowns so far, but just watching last week against Detroit, who is a subpar team or a just at average team, they were able to gash them on the air and in the ground. So again, if the Saints are without Michael Thomas again, then the targets again are going to go up here for Chris Olave, who saw 7 targets, 4 catches, 67 yards, and had his first ever touchdown pass. And in the previous 2 weeks, he's had 13 targets. And it's just been, he's seen a lot of volume here lately. So I just think he's been an absolute fine. He was a first pick, but he's been very, very good. He's been as good as advertised as we thought he would be. So Chris Olave is again another one of these must start rookie, just because he's proven that he's going to be the go-to no matter if it's Andy Dalton or it's Jameis Winston, whoever is out there. He's going to be the go-to receiver, and especially without Michael Thomas. And even when Michael Thomas is out there, he's still a guy that you can definitely start and feel confident about. So I love that matchup there for Chris Olave. Now, as far as some guys that I am a little scared about here, a little on that you have to avoid these guys. Oh boy, this is where things start to kind of get scary because so far this has kind of been the year of the haves and the year of the have-nots in fantasy football when it comes to the stardom and situms. Now, when it comes to the situms, this one is going to hurt probably a lot of you out there, but this is going to be Jerry Jeudy of the Broncos. If you have some other options out there, this is where, I mean, you might want to think about sitting him because he's had week 1 and week 4 have been great, but he's had 2 duds in week 2 and 3 against a bad Houston team. I know San Francisco, their defense has been really good, but Russell Wilson is just hasn't really blown up either. He's had the one game to start the year for 4 catches, 102 yards and 1 touchdown. But I mean, I just where you drafted him and what was expected of Jeudy, man, it's been underwhelming for Jerry Jeudy at this point. So if you have a better option, like if you have Chris Olave on your bench, or if you have maybe one of the Washington receivers and Curtis Samuel that you're able to pick up off of waivers, maybe you start him. But man, Jerry Jeudy does kind of scare me here lately because there's been some times where it's been some rough sledding for Jeudy. So I'm gonna have to fade Jerry Jeudy for this week in fantasy football because it's been kind of scary as of late. Now, as far as your fantasy running backs are concerned, now this one's going to be tough because a lot of you drafted him in the first round, but this is a guy. Well, yeah, I won't go there. But as far as the fantasy running backs are concerned, I think Rashad Penny is a guy that you're going to have to temper expectations for. And yes, I know he's Seattle's number 1, and he just absolutely blew up last week. But this is a team in New Orleans who is pretty good against the run, as far as they've only allowed 2 rushing TDs and have the 7th fewest fantasy points against, and that's the New Orleans Saints. So I know everybody's going to be so gung-ho about Rashad Penny because he had that blow-up game last week. But before that, in most leagues, it was 8 points, 1.5 points, 7 points. Last week, he had the 30. So this is a guy that I think everybody's going to be so high on because he had that monster game last week. But Rashad Penny is a guy that it just scares me going up against this solid Saints defense against the run. So I wouldn't trust him there. So if you have a better option, put somebody else in there. If you have maybe an AJ Dillon that you might want to lean on, or maybe even if you have Naheem Hines on your bench, that he is going to start in this Thursday night game without Jonathan Taylor there. So that's another option that you can take a look at and consider for fantasy playability. All right, folks. So that is going to do it for this week's episode of New England Sports Weekly. Remember to tune in next week as we will break down this Patriots and Lions game, see how, if it's Brian Hoyer, if he gets cleared, or Bailey Zappe, how they play against this Lions team. And remember, it's going to be throwback week. So we get Pat the Patriot. We get these lovely helmets and uniforms back. And then also we will look forward to their next game, which is, I believe, the Monday night game against the Chicago Bears. And no, I'm sorry. I was thinking 2 weeks ahead. They play the Cleveland Browns at 1. So they will get we'll preview this Cleveland and New England game. And of course, we will keep you up to date on anything. If there's any news, maybe about Xander Bogaerts, if they do some internal negotiations and maybe if they can bring him back. Of course, we'll keep you up to date as we're getting closer to the start of the NHL season, as that actually starts on October 12th. So actually next week, what would it be, our show? Yeah, actually next Wednesday night, start of the Bruins season. So we'll get into a little bit of Bruins here as well next week. That's we're already breaking down your show for you next week. But no, we'll get into the Bruins as they start things up, and the Celtics are getting close to the start of their season as well. So we'll keep you up to date on any news. And of course, remember at Wednesday night, the show is live streamed here on YouTube at 8:00. Then, of course, you can also follow the show on SoundCloud and Spotify. Just search New England Sports Weekly and the show will pop right up. And then, of course, you can send any live comments during the YouTube show, or if you have any questions, you can always send them to the Twitter account at NE Sports Weekly or the Instagram account, because remember, that's up and running now. It's just search NE Sports WK and send any questions there. And then, of course, you can follow my personal at Sean_Met on Instagram and on Twitter. Send me any questions there. And remember, on any platform on YouTube, Spotify, or SoundCloud, remember to hit the like and subscribe for the show. We always love to see new people watching the show. So I hope you all enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next week.